Wednesdays at 7, sharp as can be. Blue Gal's calling, come knit with me.
Hey everybody, Blue Gal here. Nice to see you. I was going to podcast last week, and it was a day and a week following when all three of my children needed me for various emergencies. And when you're an empty nester, as I am, to have a week like that is a little bit, I don't know, it's reminiscent of earlier years for sure. Things are fine. Everybody's fine. Things are going along, but there were various crises and emergencies that had to be dealt with, and we dealt with them, and now we are on back to sort of normal programming, I hope. I want to talk about current knitting. I am knitting a lot of hats. This is the month, October, that I took off from doing my monthly sock knitting. Took a break from that. And so I have been knitting hats, partly to donate to charity and partly for gifts. But my favorite hat pattern, and I will link below, I've shared it before. It is the most versatile hat pattern in the world, particularly if you are a sock knitter. It is called the Losy hat, Losy, and it is LOSY stands for leftover sock yarn. You use size 6 needles, hold 2 strands of sock yarn together, and make a knit 3, purl 1 tube for your hat. And then there's this beautiful, and follow the pattern carefully. There's a beautiful decrease at the top that keeps the purl 1 rib going all the way up to the center of the hat. And if I turn it inside out, you'll see what I mean. That ribbing goes all the way up. Some ribs go all the way up to the center of the hat. And every other one stops at a certain point. But one of the things you will notice if you knit one of these is the pattern calls to go for 6.5 inches before you do any decreases. And I have found when I'm knitting these that you get to the point, I get to the point where I go, am I really going a little too far? And this is going to be too deep a hat. But these decreases at the top happen in 15 rounds. And so the top of the hat is actually very flat. It's like a pancake. So yeah, 6.5 inches is about right. This one is greens with a single strand stripe of orange in with the greens every other row for about an inch, because that's all I had left of that orange, which I think is a nice feature. I usually try with these hats to do some of these I'm sure I've shown before. Do something solid or do something contrasted at the bottom, because there is no brim to this hat. It starts immediately with the knit 3, purl 1. And so I tried to put a color divider between the bottom and the body of the hat to give you the idea of a ribbing. This is one I did where I stranded in, I used a pink and a black. And if you've got black sock yarn in your stash that you don't know what to do with, because you're certainly not going to knit solid black socks and you're saving it for toes or something like that, this is a great idea. I used a hot pink that had a little strand of black in it, sock yarn, along with a solid black sock yarn. And then for these 3 stripes, I stranded in a lace weight mohair. And I was going to do just an inch of the plain and then do the entire hat with the mohair. And I quickly realized this mohair takes over and that you couldn't really see the black and pink marl that I liked about this hat. So I just did stripes. And yeah, it is, these hats are not too deep. They really do. This one goes with my outfit. They're not too deep. The top is flat. And so you can put a little I-cord tie off at the top if you want to, but the spiraling of that, and it's a 15 round, as I said, knitting two together or skipping and knitting. It just, you have to follow it. It's a free pattern. Follow the pattern. And so I have been spitting these out. They're fast. They are really fast. And if you run out of one color, like I did with this one, I ran out. And so I just put orange at the top. Cute. You can put a pom-pom on these. You can do anything you want. And they're warm. They're washable. I mean, if you're using sock yarn that has nylon in it, these can be washed in the machine. And I would still, lay flat to dry or puff them up to dry or whatever, stuff them with newspaper or paper towel or something, put them on a balloon to dry them. But, they are practical garments. The other thing I've been knitting lately is washcloths, and this is just to kind of keep my fingers busy. I had this one. You want to use up scraps? There you go. I started an orange cotton dishcloth, and I decided I really hated this pattern. It was too involved. It involved big pass slip stitched over lace, and I just didn't like it. So I grabbed all the other partial balls of cotton that I had and ran until I ran out, and then just used one little strand of yellow at the top. And I actually like this dishcloth. I'll put this in my own kitchen. Then I found I got a bunch of yarn at a giveaway somewhere. This is discontinued Reynolds colors. I think I have 6 skeins of this in different colors. And this is a very heavy cotton. I'm not sure how absorbent it's going to be, and I'm not sure how much it's going to shrink. I cast on 25 on size 10 needles for this. I know it's going to shrink, and so for the next one, I'm going to cast on more stitches. I think I might even go as high as 40 for this because it's going to shrink when it's washed. Speaking of shrinking when it's washed, I found a wonderful dishcloth pattern for free online that I will share with you. It's a resource, actually, called Knitting Unlimited, which maybe you've heard of. Has a lot of dishcloth patterns, a lot of it's kind of a Barbara Walker book online. It's just a lot of different knit and purl patterns, a lot of lace patterns. They show pictures of them and then the chart and so forth. But I found this one, and this is a basket weave. And here it is, just knit up before you wash it. It's a basket weave with yarn overs in the middle of the basket weave, and a decrease that goes different ways depending on where you are in the basket weave. And I used a beige yarn because I knew I wanted the basket weave to show off. Well, look what happens. This is unwashed. And this is washed and put through the dryer. The yarn overs tighten up quite a bit. And it looks beautiful. It really looks like a basket weave. So I'm going to wash this other one. The other thing I recommend with the, with these is don't work the ends in at the beginning and the end until you've washed it. Let it all shrink up. And then when you get it out of the dryer, work those 2 ends in, because everything tightens up and it's a lot easier to find a good place to hide those ends. And the last thing that I'm knitting is taking a lot longer because it's size 2.5 needles, but I'm knitting another hat with some yarn that came from the brown on this hat came from Marianne's stash. And I've talked about Marianne. She was a owner of a phenomenal yarn stash. And this was part of, I think, like Wonderland kit that she had obviously started and never finished, and we couldn't find the project was not in the bag with the little balls of yarn. But this brown was had a lot of interesting lights and darks in it. And then I'm using Oddball of Regia from my stash design line. This is K Facet, I believe. Is that what it says? Yeah, K Facet. This is K Facet yarn, an Oddball K Facet yarn. But I was starting to get a little nervous because I started knitting with my own sock yarn, and it sort of looked camo to me, even though it's got a lot of blue in it. And so I was going to switch to blue or put some blue stripes in it, and I couldn't find the right blue, but I found a bright navy pom-pom. And so I'm going to put this bright navy pom-pom on the top, and that takes away all of the camo look to this hat and makes it a fun, brings out the blue, makes it a fun blue novelty hat. And I'm not going to go too much farther on this. This is the Croy sock yarn hat pattern that I used. I think I cast on like 152 or something like that. You knit one, purl one forever, 4 inches. And then you're supposed to do a stockinette, but I'm actually doing knit 3, purl 1, just like I did with the Losi hats, because it's just more interesting. You don't feel like you're just going endless stockinette by putting that purl bump in there. Put that little rib in there. So that's where I'm at. And now I'm planning November knitting, and I'm actually this weekend going to put together a Christmas gift list and what I want to accomplish, and who gets Christmas socks and who doesn't. Pretty much is the deal with that. I want to talk today. Well, first of all, I want to thank somebody. I want to thank Melissa on Blue Sky, because Melissa put up a post on Blue Sky showing her hats, and she knit the Eat the Rich hat, and she knit the Shetland Wool Week hat, the All Over Turi hat, and she said that I, Blue Gal, knit-fluenced her. I knit-fluenced her. And that made me all verklempt. So thank you, Melissa. That's so sweet. And your hats are beautiful. And I was going to talk about this last week, and I didn't get a chance, of course, because life got in the way. But there is a YouTuber with a lot more followers than I have, who, and I think the video that I'm going to share with you and link to has like 902 comments now. So, she's not coming for my traffic. That's fine. But her name is Lucy Lang, and she is a young crafter who did a wonderful video on yarn stash and consumerism. And I left a comment there about how great it was. I really enjoyed listening to what she had to say. We have a difference of approach to how we do our YouTube videos. She cuts hers a lot in between pauses and sentences, and I don't. I just let the microphone and the video camera run and talk. She also, I think, follows. I've seen some of her other videos. She talks a lot about the Marie Kondo spark joy. Make sure that everything you own has not only sparks joy, but has a purpose in your life. She talks about anti-consumerism. She talks about minimalism, and has some very good advice, I thought. One of the things that she talks about in her video, the one that I'm specifically addressing, is the one about yarn stashes. She opens her video with this picture of a yarn stash that, yeah, that's out of control. Either somebody's sorting that, or if that's how someone keeps their yarn room, yeah, that's a lot of yarn, and that's not organized well. Certainly not in a way that preserves it from damage. Uh, and it's not a question of judging an individual for having yarn like that. It's more a message about consumerism and having more yarn than you will ever use, and having yarn that doesn't serve you. And she talks about consumerism as a hobby, arguing that collecting yarn has become the hobby itself rather than crafting, and comparing it to other hobbies, woodworking. There are all kinds of other hobbies that people have, quilting, where acquiring supplies becomes more important than the actual hobby. She talks about the scarcity mindset, that fear of missing deals, or there is a deal. I've talked in the past about how Karen cakes are the devil because they're all limited edition, and if you don't buy them now, they'll be gone, and they aren't going to make that color again, and so it's collectible, and so you collect them. And I have seen multiple large yarn stashes that are nothing more than maintaining an inventory of limited edition yarns. And whether you think at some point you're going to sell them on eBay and that's going to be your retirement, that's not going to happen. But Karen Cakes definitely feeds into that scarcity mindset and manipulates people into thinking that, well, I have to have this now, and I have to have all of it. And we all did that. We all did videos about clearance at Joann's, right? Joann's is gone now, and this idea that Michael's ex Joann's is going to be as good as Joann's is not true. It's just not. But one of the things that absolutely blew my mind in Lucy Lang's video was where she talked about girl math and the belief that if you use something out of your stash, that means it's free. And not taking into account that you paid for it, and you might still be paying for it if you charge yarn. If you have credit card debt from yarn, God bless you, but you're still paying for it. But I used it from stash, so it's no additional cost, but it still costs you something. The idea, she talks about peer pressure, the idea that if you go to fiber festivals, this is higher end stuff. You go to fiber festivals, you go to farmers markets, you go to any place, yarn conventions, Vogue Knitting, whatever. You go there, you have to buy something because it's a souvenir from the trip, and you have to participate in the buying is part of the activity of the group. I have felt that in a very negative kind of hostile way at some places, where I felt snapped at because I wasn't buying enough, or I was mentioning to other people about stash management at a time when all of them, the purpose of the trip was buy stuff. Yeah. Lucy talks about people having poor organization skills and never being taught how to store yarn properly. She talks about creative hoarding tendencies where, and I'm guilty of this, you know, I make a commitment to tell myself that I am an artist and that every skein of yarn that I own, even if it's just for inspiration, is mine. And I argue against the sexist belief that women in their art can't take up space. Nobody ever told Pablo Picasso he had too much blue paint, right? But women in particular are constantly told, well, look at all that stuff you're never going to use, when you may be holding on to it for inspiration. It may be inspiring you. And it's important to take responsibility for that as an artist, and cull down what isn't inspiring you. That can be feeding the artist, going through and making sure that everything you own does matter to you as an artist is a really important step toward actually becoming what you want to be in terms of art. But then you get into fear of use, and this was something Lucy said. You have to keep it pristine and unused, because if you use it, if you wind it, if you use part of it and you have a partial skein left, that yarn isn't good anymore. That yarn isn't as good as it was on the skein, and it might be wasted on the wrong project. And in the end, she had kind of a, I hate the word controversial. That's the wrong word. She made a statement that I think some people might disagree with, about status symbol theory, that large stashes have become a badge of honor in the crafting community, and romanticizing the suffering artist who has more yarn than space. I'm not so sure about that. I think sometimes people post their overwhelming stashes as a cry for help, and consciously do so. But yeah, and that's why I don't do destashing videos, even though I know they'd bring this channel traffic. That's not, it's not my thing. So I wanted to talk for a minute about where Lucy is on her knitting journey, on their knitting journey, and where I am in terms of being a 62-year-old knitter, because Lucy is in their 20s. And I'm sorry, Lucy, I can't remember what your pronouns are, but I'm going to say they, them, just because that way I'm trying to treat this, trying to be fair here. The difference between a 20-something on their journey and a 62-year-old on their journey in terms of knitting, in terms of yarn collection and stash, I think is very different. And it's a great conversation to have. That's why I'm making this video. My perspective is more from the Swedish death cleaning line of thinking than the KonMari line of thinking. And if you know about those, KonMari is everything should spark joy and be organized, and Swedish death cleaning is you don't want to leave behind large quantities of stuff for your descendants to go through. And I did find the quote from Modern Daily Knitting. It was Anne Shane at Modern Daily Knitting, and this is what she said. She said, "I am 100% going to leave every bit of ephemera in this house for my descendants to fool with. I had to do it. They'll have to do it too. They'll discover all sorts of stuff about me. Like they'll be rooting around and be all, these silver kitten-heeled booties. What was she thinking?" So that's one attitude to have. My attitude is a little different. I know that I'm going to leave yarn behind for my kids to deal with, but I also know that I belong to two, and I'm adjacent to a third yarn groups that will take my yarn. and all my craft stuff and distribute it because I've seen it happen. And I did an entire video about I Knit Dead People. That's what it was called. And it was about Marianne's magnificent over the top stash of yarn that my knitting guild dealt with. And she passed away. She died young. She died. She got a disease and she went downhill very quickly and she died. And without a chance really to go through her stash and figure out what was there. And so it was good that she had us, that she had the guild, the knitting guild, to go through and take that yarn and find a good home for it. But it woke me up, and I think it woke a lot of us up to what are we leaving behind and how fragile life can be in this human frame of mind, and that, you know, it's not so much what am I leaving behind for my descendants, but how am I spending the remaining years that I have, which hopefully are fewer years than Lucy has in her 20s, right? Well, it's much more critical for me to know, will I realistically use this yarn? On the other hand, having 40 or 50 more years of experience knitting means I have a much better understanding, hopefully, of what I want to knit and the kind of yarn I like to knit and the kind of needles I like to knit with. Chigu, if you're wondering. Yeah, so all of that information that I've gathered over 5 decades, and I've been knitting since I was 18 and I'm 62, so it is decades. But I have learned very, very consciously what it is I want to do now. And it's not knit shawls with 5 skeins of fingering weight yarn. that is something I have given away. I've given away my shawl patterns. And I love Casapinka and I love Stephen West. And I watched Stephen West do his 3-hour introduction to his latest knit along shawl. His work is great, and I went to Ravelry and looked at all the shawls that other people were making, was inspired by the colorways that people used. I ain't making one. Because life's too short. That's why I'm not making one. Yeah. And it's not a question of, do I want my kids dealing with 50 or 100 or 300 or whatever skeins of yarn that are in my stash. It is more about calculating projects against actual knitting time remaining, not just shelf space, and making sure that what I'm knitting and what I'm doing sparks joy, not what I have sparks joy. And every skein that's sitting there that I know I'm not interested in doing anything with it represents hours that I don't have left. And also at this point in my life, I've already cycled through trends, and like I said, I know the yarns that I like. My husband said to me this afternoon, as I was talking to him about what are you going to talk about on your podcast today, he said, you can scope out a yarn store in 5 minutes. I have seen you do it. I drive around the block and you're done. And it's because I know what I'm looking for, and I know what I don't want to buy, and I see it and I get it and I buy it and I leave, right? Yeah. So that's my perspective in terms of stash management and buying and uh, all of it. Having a lot of yarn is not the problem. Knowing what you have is the issue, and grateful. I'm grateful for my stash, and I'm grateful for being able to talk about it, and grateful to Lucy for her perspective. I mean, like I said, that girl math thing, where she talked about, just because you're using it from stash doesn't mean it's free, right? I mean, that's the other thing. Because I belong to a guild, and I also belong to a charity knitting and actually sewing group, and then I also am attached to, in several ways, another craft group. And that now we have a local yarn store, by the way, called Extra Yarn, that accepts donations of oddballs so that children can learn to knit with the oddballs, which is great. And they have a shelf, and they have handmade knitting spools for children to use to make I-cord. And yeah, it's great. But I have lots of avenues for which to donate yarn and get rid of it and make sure it finds a good home. But then I also have a lot of outlets that then bring yarn into my life for free. So people donate yarn to my church all the time, and it's usually someone who's died. And they use the acrylic yarn for their charity work, and then they find a home for the non-acrylic yarns, and I take it. I'm the knitting whisperer there, and I pass it along to Guild. I pass it along to Knitting Guild. So, and then it's used in charity knitting there too. But it's the wool yarn. But there's this river system of yarn flowing in and out of this house that is, means that if it's in my stash, I didn't necessarily pay for it. Someone did, and it's worth knowing that and acknowledging it. But it's not necessarily a financial burden to me at this point, because I see that I don't need to buy a lot of yarn because it's always coming into this house from some other source. Now I've talked long enough. I'm going to read something and yell about it for a minute because I came across this in Knitting Yarns by Ann Hood, edited by Ann Hood. And this is just a little snippet by Bernadette Murphy called Failing Better. Knitting teaches this perfectionist that what is truly precious in life is a radical acceptance of errors and an appreciation of our human capacity for resiliency. And she talks about a friend of hers. And I'm just going to read a little tiny segment of it. A friend, Kathy, contacted me to help her plan a baby shower for a friend of hers. Could I teach a group of women to knit all at once, getting them far enough along that each could produce a 4x4-inch knitted square, which Kathy would then piece together into a baby blanket? Kathy, that's a terrible idea. Instead of getting a party favorite, the women who attend will not only each get a knitting lesson, but a skein of yarn and a pair of needles to keep them going, she enthused, certain this was a great idea. Kathy, it's a terrible idea. I wouldn't do that with my knitting guild, and all of them have been knitting for 50 years, right? 30 years. We've got women in there that won the blue ribbon at the fair last year for knitting, and I wouldn't do this. I worried about how the event would unfold. Yeah. I'm not going to keep reading. The point of the rest of it is she starts to teach Kathy to knit. And the author's habit when they're teaching someone to knit is, when they make a mistake, is to take the needles back and show them how to fix their knitting. And Kathy wouldn't have it. Kathy wanted to hold on to those needles and said, no, I'm going to fix it. You're going to show me how to fix it, but I'm going to fix it. And it's a lesson in power. It's a lesson in letting go. It's a lesson in, learning patience and so forth. This is why I am against teaching beginning knitting. YouTube is your friend. And I believe in my heart that if I knit in airports, I knit in public spaces, I knit in restaurants, and invariably someone walks up to me and says, I wish I could learn to knit. And I always say the same thing. YouTube is your friend. Go look at YouTube, learn to knit, look it up, find someone whose voice does not annoy you, and learn the beginning part of knitting that way. Then when you feel like you've gotten to the point where you can knit a square, a garter stitch, you've got the 2 stitches, and you can do stockinette, you can do 1 row of knitting and 1 row of purling and kind of know what you're doing, and you want to branch out, go to a yarn store, take a class, start learning how to do more. But until then, YouTube is your friend because nobody else has the patience to do it, except YouTube, where you can watch the same thing 20 times and learn how to do it. Preserve your friendships that way. I hope you guys have a great week, and thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
On Wednesdays at 7, sharp as can be, Blue Gal's calling, come knit with me.